You're smart, you're motivated, you want to do something big. You're on the verge of being a young boss, and we'll help you get there. I'm Isabel Garino, your host of the Young Boss Podcast, where youth is your power. Hey guys, it's Isabel Garino from Young Boss Podcast, and today we're talking all about firing people. And let me tell you, I've had to fire a lot of people in my career, and sometimes it is not that fun. I can recall, many different situations where I had to fire people and it made me feel like shit. Like I left the conversation like I did not want to do this. I do not like how I feel. I feel terrible about this. So I know that many of you who are bosses, who are CEOs, entrepreneurs, running your own businesses, you've had situations like this too, where maybe you left a firing call and felt really good about it or felt terrible about it. So I want to dive in and talk about this because it's really important for us to cover this as young bosses who maybe don't have as much experience in hiring and firing and dealing with people in that way. In my career, I have had to fire cousins, my mother-in-law at the time, friends, my brother-in-law, my brother, my sister-in-law, and even my ex-husband. I mean, the list goes on, and it's not always fun. There's been a lot of heartbreak and heartache in all of those different conversations and firing situations. I remember when I had to fire my cousin, who I absolutely adored, and he was a great culture and core value fit within our company, but he just couldn't hit the KPIs. He couldn't make the mark. And I had to sit and think about that situation to say, wait. If this wasn't my cousin, if this was Joe Schmo from down the street and he wasn't hitting the KPIs, how fast would I be to let him go? How fast would I be to fire him? I'd be pretty quick, right? And so just because he's my cousin, I'm not going to keep him around. If he's not making the mark, we have to let it go. We have to go our separate ways. When I had to fire my brother-in-law, it broke my heart. I absolutely loved working with him, but it was one of those situations where what got us here wasn't going to get us there. He gave us like 5-6 years of incredible effort and so much hard work. And much of our marketing was due to his incredible skills and talents. But then at some point, it's time to step up and go to a new level and bring in some fresh blood. And we were able to do that, but it broke my heart not being able to work with him anymore. And that was a really, really tough firing for me. I remember with my mother-in-law, right? My ex-mother-in-law, and I was just devastated to see her go when I had to let her go. That was a conversation that you never want to have as a daughter-in-law, right? I was just cringing the entire time, like, holy shit, how am I going to do this, right? And the conversation was just really based on I had expected certain things that she had the capabilities to do without asking those questions. I'd made assumptions on her previous work experience, her skills, and it wasn't the reality. And so I had to deal with my assumptions and who I thought she was and how I thought she was going to perform at work and what was actually happening. So I have learned a lot from my background in firing, and I'm here to tell you it's not always fun, but it's definitely something we can always be working through, always be pushing forward. And really it's doable, and you have to do it whether you want to or not. And that's the reality at the end of the day. How do you know when it's the right time to fire someone? Well, for me, a lot of times it comes down to KPIs or core values. So if you're not hitting your KPIs, it doesn't matter if you're a friend or a family member or a stranger who's been working for me for 5 years, it's important that you're hitting those goals. And if I'm going to hold everyone accountable to the same measurements, then it really doesn't matter. If you don't hit them, you don't hit them, and you no longer have a job. And that sucks to hear. But the reality is, as a boss, as an employer, you have to be serious about the regulations you're putting down, saying, this is what I expect to see. This is the dollar amount I want sold. This is the number of calls you need to make. This is the experience you need to create in my workplace. And if they're not able to do that, then you have to stand by the standards that you set and make that move accordingly. When it comes to core values, I think that's another thing. Making sure that you have those set up front is absolutely key. And for a lot of young bosses, they kind of forget about that. They just go right into business and they don't think about their mission statement, their core values. And we'll dive into that in other episodes. But when someone's no longer a core value fit, when you don't trust them in your workplace, when you don't trust their character, that they're communicating with you honestly about what's happening on a day-to-day basis, that's not going to fly. And you're not going to trust this person to continue doing what you asked them and hired them to do. A lot of times you'll end up double doing their work, resenting them, and it's just going to cause a lot of anger, pain, and frustration in your life and their life. So I always say, be slow to hire and quick to fire, because when we talk about hiring someone, we really want to make sure that they're a fit. But when it comes to firing someone, it's pretty evident. If almost everyone I fired, I wish I would have done it sooner because I saw the signs sooner. And I know some of you listening know exactly what I'm talking about. You saw the signs, you felt the energy, and you were like, oh, but they didn't mean it, or oh, it wasn't whatever. Yes, it was. You saw the writing on the wall. Ask those questions, go deep, but be real. You have to be direct and real in these conversations, especially as a young boss. We don't have time to waste. And it's when you're building something that's your own, you care about it and you want to make sure it's being done right. So having the right team and the right crew around you is vital. If you don't have an HR department and you're going to be the one who's doing your hiring and firing, then it's really important you have everything written down. Whether these people are employees to you or independent contractors to you, it's vital that you have everything documented. You can't just fire somebody on a whim. You need to make sure it's a violation against the contracts you've signed with them. And during the firing process, you want to be crossing your T's and dotting your I's. You want these calls recorded. You probably want a third party there. You want to make sure that everything you're saying is legit and valid and that nothing can be misconstrued. You also want to make sure you are in a great place, like a calm, happy, woo-saw place, because if you come in there with harsh, angry energy, it's kind of like when you have a kid, right, and you're punishing them. When you talk about spanking, right, it's an unpopular opinion. Is spanking okay or not? Well, when you spank a child out of anger, in the moment with your hand, those things are probably wrong. When you spank a child when you're calm, when you can tell them the reason why it mattered and you're relaxed about it and it's with a third party item, right? Those are the rules of spanking. So it's kind of the same thing with firing. You don't want to do it out of anger. You don't want to do it in the moment. You want to make sure that you're prepared. You have your contracts, you're recording it, you have a third party there, and you're doing everything by the book so that this person knows exactly why it's no longer a fit and what you plan to do after. I know for me, I really try to maintain relationships post firing, right? A lot of these people who work with me, they become like family to me. I mean, you already know I hire a lot of family and friends, but a lot of them who were just friends, they've now become in my inner circle in my family. And so I don't just want to discard them and never talk to them again. I mean, many of my coworkers, I've attended their weddings, their baby showers, their, birthday parties, and I don't want that to end. I cared about them. They cared about me. They invested in me and my company as a young boss. And many of you listening are like, yep, I know exactly that. Like they gave me their heart and soul and it ended poorly, but I don't want it to just go away. So maintaining that relationship is really important. And, at the end of the day, it's not personal, it's business, right? I think Oprah Winfrey said that, but I feel like all of us say that. It's really not. You can't be taking things personal. You have to understand that at the end of the day, it's business. Dollars are dollars, and you have to just make it work. So if they're no longer a fit, you have to be quick to fire. I know sometimes like firing comes out of feeling like you were taken advantage of or somebody did wrong to you. And that's when it's tough to not be angry about it, to not be volatile about it, to not, be pissed. Let's be real. Your business is your baby, right? I know that full well. And for many of you listening who own and operate your own businesses, you feel that way. You're like, I started this thing from the ground up and this person screwed me. That's tough. So I want to make sure that, again, you're going back to all of your methods and you're making sure that people are staying in contract from the get-go. And the moment they violate that, they're aware of it. They're aware of the action plan to make their wrongdoings better. Or if it's something that's a no-no, like someone genuinely screwed you over, screwed you out of business, did something malicious to you, that's the time to just take action. Don't listen to that thought in your head that says, oh, they didn't mean it. They didn't this, they didn't that. Talk to them, find out if they did or didn't mean it. But your gut knows, right? You're in this business for a reason. You're the boss for a reason. Listen to your gut and trust your gut. There are so many challenges when it comes to firing. Like what makes it so difficult is that you feel like you're breaking up with someone, right? I mean, I know it's at work, but it genuinely feels like that. It feels like a breakup. Like you're like, I'm sorry, it wasn't you, it was me. And especially if you're a people pleaser personality, this can be challenging. So I do highly recommend that if you are a people pleasing personality, that you put in place someone who can take care of that for you, someone maybe in a part-time HR position who can do the firing for you, because you then are possibly going to backpedal and say things and oh, I didn't really mean it, and maybe we can find another position for you. I'll never forget when I used to work with my dad, how he was just an ultimate, I don't want to say people pleaser, but he just loved people, okay? Maybe a little bit of a pushover when it came to firing. And we'd enter the conversation and it was me and him, and he'd be like, okay, we're going to let go of so-and-so. We're going to say, 3 weeks, finish this up, and this is what we're going to pay. And we'd have this all planned, and the both of us get on the call, and he would hear the person out and he'd chat with them about their kids and their life. And all of a sudden he would turn and he wouldn't talk about the firing at all. He'd turn to me and be like, okay, Belle, so what do you want to do here? And I'm like, what are you talking about, bro? Like, we already know what we're doing here. Like, and he would totally turn it on me. So I had to become like the bad guy for years and be the one who was like harsh in the conversations and say, thanks so much for sharing with us about your life and where everything's going. But at this point, it's no longer a fit because of XYZ reasons. This is the way we're going to handle it going forward, and this is what's going to happen. And I had to get harsh and aggressive, and that's not necessarily who I like to be. That's not a muscle I like to work often, but it really taught me a lot about being a people pleaser in these conversations and how that can harm you. Because if I left him alone in that conversation, the person probably would have left with a raise and another job, and they would definitely still be working for us today. And I would be so frustrated. So if you're not the type of person who can be savage, then find someone who is and have that be your third party. So even when you start heading down that road of like, maybe I'm making a mistake, I love them, I want them around. No, you already came into this with a reason. You know what you need to do, and just make it happen. In one of my more recent firing experiences, I noticed that I'm getting these reactions out of people that are really correlated to the stages of grief. I've had people be, angry with me for firing them and start yelling at me and be upset and show that level of intensity and anger. I've had people who are trying to bargain with me to stay for their job and beg for their job. And no, I don't want this to happen. I still want to work for you. And please, please, please. And that bargaining side of it. I've had other people who are in complete denial. They're like, no, I'm not. I've had guys who literally didn't tell their wives that they were fired for weeks, and their wives are still like DMing me and messaging me like everything's, hoo ha ha, we're having a great time. And I'm like, you don't know that I just let your husband go. I can tell. And then when I ask them, they're like, no, I can't tell her. So like denial is a big thing when it comes to firing. And then of course, depression. I mean, sometimes you get fired and it like breaks your heart and you're just depressed because maybe you thought you were doing the right thing, or you're just sad about it because you love your work family, you love your work culture, and you don't want it to go away. I've had a lot of people who've just been sad in the conversation, and that's always heartbreaking because you never want to make anybody feel bad. But, at the end of the day, the fifth phase of grief, right? And we know that they don't go in order and people hop around and they go in and out of them. But the last one is acceptance. And it's very rare to be on a firing call where someone's like, oh, I fully accept this. Like, I get it. I messed up. I did it all wrong. And you're so right. And I'll go find another job. Thanks so much for the opportunity. That is rare. It takes an extremely secure person who probably knows that they weren't the right fit, right? To be able to have that form of acceptance. But eventually we all get there, right? You go through these stages of grief and you get there. But that's something to consider, being on the other end of the spectrum. When you're having these conversations with the people you're firing, they're probably going to give you one of many reactions, that it might be something in that grief scale, right? Something along those lines where you start to say like, yeah, okay, they're coming with me with anger, and it's okay. Once you internalize that and you understand why they're doing that, it actually makes it a lot easier to accept and anticipate, because more than likely it's going to fall in one of those. When it comes to tips for firing people, I'm always going to tell you, listen, listen, listen. It is so important to just be authentic and empathetic during that conversation and listen to what they have to say, because sometimes they're going to give you feedback about your own business or the way you operate that you need to hear. Sometimes it's real stuff that actually it wasn't a fit for them. It's not just it wasn't a fit for you. So making sure that you're staying in contract, you're recording everything, you're being empathetic, you're listening. Don't underestimate the emotionality of all of it. Like, it is really hurtful and sad to lose a job. And the more understanding you can be, the easier the conversation can go. I will also highly advise that you go into it with a calm energy, that you go in well rested, that you go in a peaceful mindset. If you've had a ton of shitty meetings all day long, you do not want to then go into a firing conversation, because if that person starts popping off at you, you're probably not going to be ready to, ooh, okay, I'm here to listen. I understand. You're going to hit them with anger back because you're already at a heightened emotional state. So make sure that you're well rested, you're calm. Try to not book many, intensive things beforehand so that you can come into it with a peaceful mindset. I think one of my hardest firings was with one of my really good friends. He was working for us for a long time, and he was so loyal to our company. The core values were never an issue, and we really, really loved working with him. But we hit a bump in the road where he was working with someone else, someone new in our company, and he all of a sudden changed everything about the way he was working and became a person I didn't even know who he was. And after talking to him and asking him what's going on and trying to understand it, it really was eating away at him. And I just watched this person who was such a good fit for us and it was working out so well turn into someone and something that was no longer. I could feel wasn't happy at work. He wasn't healthy at work. It was starting to destroy his relationships outside of work. And it was like, this isn't good for you. So it was so hard for me to let him go because I wanted him there, but I cared more about him as a human and how this was affecting him on a day-to-day basis. And I knew that him being released from this energy in his life was going to help him. We spend most of our days at work, most of our lives at work. And so that's a lot of time, energy, and effort spent somewhere where if you're not in a healthy mindset, if you're in a really negative place, it's going to seep into your life, right? And if you can sense that in your employees and you try to help them and you ask them, how can I help you? And try to work with them in that, but it doesn't work. Sometimes the best thing to do is say, let's take a step away. Like, you need to go heal yourself. You need to go have this, time. So that was really hard for me emotionally because he's crying, I'm crying. I'm like, I love you. And he's like, I love you. And it was just terrible. But it was one of those things that it was the best situation for him. And now he's out crushing it at a new job. And he's like super happy and his wife is happy and he's in a great space and we can stay friends now. But I had to make that hard decision. I had to make that cut to say, actually, it's not the right fit right now. And as much as I love you, this just really isn't going to work. So I'm proud that I did it, but dang, was that hard. One of the easiest firings I ever had to do was with someone who went straight to that acceptance phase, right? One of my friends, absolutely adore her, was working for us and she was just a workhorse. No matter what role, what project I gave her, she was a go-getter trying to get it done. But the company she was working for, we were starting to dissolve that company and there really just wasn't a job left. And I tried so hard to say, right people, right seats. Let me find another job for her. Let me put her somewhere else. And there was just nothing left. I was going to end up being overstaffed and paying more than I could afford at the time. So having that conversation with her, I was just sitting there like, I felt like a failure as a boss to say, I can't afford to keep you. You're a rock star, but I can't keep you. Like, this is a me thing, truly. And she was so accepting and understanding and was like, what can I do to support you in this transition? And just an absolute doll about it. She's now, because of her role and because of her title within our company and glowing recommendations from all of us, she now got a job that almost pays her double elsewhere. So it worked out in the end, but it was one of the easiest firings I've ever had to do because she was understanding and she was right there with me. She cared so much about the company that she got it. She saw the writing on the wall and she was willing to just jump to the acceptance phase and put that ego down. And that's really hard to do. But it was definitely one of my more easier firings, even though none of them are easy, right? We all know that, but it was definitely an easier one. Sometimes you're like worried, did I make the right decision? After you fired this person, you're like, oh my God, did I make the right decision? And I have to share, we fired this girl a couple months ago. And as soon as we got on the call, everything that the people in the company had been telling me about her, it all came true. I saw it all with my own eyes. She had been behaving differently towards me and differently towards my staff. And my staff kept telling me, she behaves this way, she talks to us this way, she does this. And I was like, what are you talking about? No, she doesn't. And I really couldn't put my finger on it because that's not who she was to me. She was never that way. So I was shocked. I was like, there's no way we're talking about the same girl. And then finally I decided to open my eyes, open my ears and listen. And during the firing conversation, she was exactly who they claimed she was. She started coming at me with anger, with accusations, saying, I can't learn anything from anyone at this company. And I was like, oh man, okay, like I get it. She started dissing all of my staff members. They don't have this background. They don't have this education. You're picking them over me. And I was mortified that I stuck up for this girl for as long as I did, because what my staff was telling me was true. And I know that my staff has my back and I know that they wanted me to see these things, but this person was behaving completely different to me. So sometimes when you're in that gray area, you're like, I don't know if I should or shouldn't fire this person. When you have those tough conversations and you say really where you're at and what you're feeling and what you're looking to do moving forward, sometimes it becomes real obvious and the person shows who they are. And you're like, holy cow, I did not even see that. And now all of a sudden, you made the right decision. You are not in the gray zone anymore. It's very black and white and it's apparent that you did the right thing. So sometimes you have to trust the people around you because they might be seeing things deeper in the business when you're not there. You're the boss. Everyone's going to be behaving when you're around. So it's important to hear what they're doing when you're not there, right? Whether you own a esthetician shop, a med spa, a lash studio, a massage, therapy, if the customer said something, if your other staff member said something, listen to them. They are the heartbeat of the business. Sometimes you're not there and you're not seeing what they're seeing. And so it's really important, if you are in the gray zone, have those hard conversations to know that you're making that right decision moving forward. And like I said earlier, trust your gut. It's never wrong. When it comes to working with friends and family, I know that there's so many conversations you have to have up front about what does this look like when this dissolves? Because the reality is we're probably all not going to do the same thing for the rest of our lives. So what does it look like when I want to leave, when you want me to leave, when everyone else wants me to leave? And have those conversations, right? Because nothing lasts forever. And it's easier. It's kind of like a prenup, right? It's easier to have the conversation in the beginning of the relationship when you're in love and everything's happy and, oh, it's amazing, than to have it during the divorce, right? When you're saying like, oh my gosh, everything's terrible now and I freaking hate you. And you don't want to have that conversation about money and splitting up things and custody then. You want to have it when you're happy, you're peaceful, you're calm. So when you do want to work with friends and family, which I always think you should, okay? Because the reality is if you aren't working with friends and family, who are you working with? Strangers and enemies? Like, no, I want to work with people I love. I want to have conversations about my life right after a conversation about business. And that's how I choose to operate. I know not everybody likes that, but for sure for me, it's something that I adore and I enjoy in my workplace, but definitely setting the tone up front, having that conversation with a friend, like, hey, I need you to be okay that at work, I might have to be harsh on you sometimes. I might have to say things you don't like. We might not be cool at work, but like you're always cool as my friend, and I'm not going to let this affect our friendship. I know when my sister and I started working together, there were so many things from our childhood that would come up and she'd be like, you always do this. Even when we were kids, you do this. And I was like, whoa. And we had to have a real heart to heart and sit there and say, we can't bring our past stuff into this. We can't have this relationship where it's all about, what we did in the past, what we said in the past, who we were in the past. We're in a different environment. It's work, it's not family, right? And we've grown. We're adults now. So don't lord those things over me. But to me, knowing your friends and your family and their strengths and weaknesses actually can really aid you in business. So there's things to be aware of. There's contracts to make, conversations to have prior, but it can aid you because you know how they tick. You know how they work, and it can be a lot of fun. So it's not always bad, but you have to make sure that you get everything in alignment before you begin. Here's some ways that I mentally prepare for firing someone. Listening to great music, having happy, positive thoughts, making sure I'm breathing, getting fresh air, practicing the conversation beforehand, and focusing on positive affirmations. You're gonna get through this, trust me. So in conclusion, definitely always be slow to hire, fast to fire. Make sure you have your measurables in alignment. Pull those contracts, know your KPIs, see where they've gone wrong, and make sure that you have it all documented. What has been happening that's negative, that's positive, and why are you actually making this move, and what's your plan to move forward with it? Firing friends and family can always be challenging, so don't forget the emotions. Don't forget that they're going through some possible grief and that there's a lot of issues that can come up. So listen, stay kind, and be patient. Always remember to stay calm. Listen to your music, take your deep breath, just be peaceful when you enter the conversation and stay present. These conversations can be tough. And so don't be thinking about what you have to do next. Don't be, worried about what meeting's coming up later. Be present. This person deserves your attention. They deserve your time, and they deserve conversation. They might have questions. They might have worries and struggles, and you need to be there for them in this moment. Especially as a young boss, it's important that you do these things right. You don't want a bad reputation and having people run around saying why they shouldn't work for you. We want to make sure that people continue to want to work for you and that your reputation as a boss is one who not only hires people in a gracious and accepting and loving way, but also fires people in a gracious, accepting, and loving way. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Isabel Garino, your host of the Young Boss Podcast. Make sure that you like, follow, and share this episode with any other young bosses in your life. We're on TikTok, we're on Instagram. Give us a like, give us a follow there, and make sure to leave a comment below on what you want us to cover next. Can't wait to see you there.